We're on Crilly Court now, walking.
Crilly Court.
A friend of mine bought one of these homes in the early 70s, I believe, and paid $59,000 for it.
Precisely. And I sold, I'll show it to you as we walk by, I sold a home down the street a few years ago. No parking and in need of total renovation for well over $500,000. Now, some of these, of course, go in excess of $1 million, depending upon how much they've been renovated.
And they're not really very large homes inside either.
Large homes at all. No, you need every level you can get. Hello.
Hi.
There was a TV series called Moving On HBO that was filmed in front of this building. Back in the 80s.
And this was converted, when, about 10 years ago to condos?
About 10 years to condos. They did a very nice job. And there's somewhat of a problem in...
Well, let me plug a friend. It was the Ruttenberg family that owned that and converted it, and they have a history of doing nice work in Lincoln Park.
They definitely do, and hopefully we'll be driving by Belgravia Terrace and a couple of other Belgravia properties. The problem with this development, if you can say it's a problem, it's just the nature, unfortunately, of Old Town in Lincoln Park, and that is the fact that there's very limited parking. There's only, I think, maybe a half a dozen parking spaces, maybe a dozen. Yet there's substantially more apartments. They did combine units. I was in there recently, and they did a very, very nice job.
How serious is the parking to most of the buyers in the area? Because you have a cab at your fingertips every...
Interestingly enough, it's not as important as you would think it is. Again, in other areas of Lincoln Park, it's almost impossible to sell a home that doesn't have parking either attached or behind the house or in the building itself. Over here in Old Town, those people who move here are people who are charmed by the neighborhood and are willing to put up with the inconvenience of street parking or perhaps parking in one of the high-rises. That's the Americana over there, 1636 Wells. There's also 1660 LaSalle down the way. Many of those high-rises have parking for neighbors. It's pretty expensive, by the way. It's somewhere around, I would imagine, $200 to $250 a month to park.
I know people who bought studio units in some of those buildings so that they could have the parking and rented out the unit and live back here.
We see that in a number of buildings where I'm thinking specifically of the Berry, which is at 3100 Sheridan.
Sure.
Beautiful building. It had parking when it was built back in the 20s, but when the co-op failed in the 30s, the owner sold off the garage, which was a block away, and leaving a beautiful building stranded there without parking. So many people have purchased in 3110 immediately next door and rent out the apartments.
And I would think even $500,000 for a gut would be a bargain today on these, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Now, look, you see up there, there's some... I'm not being critical here, it's just hard to keep up the facades here. We're talking about sandstone here in many cases. The parapets up there.
Well, one of the problems with buying in landmark areas, depending on how strict the area is that when you have to restore something, the expense can become very significant.
Exorbitant, absolutely exorbitant. And I mean, I can easily see someone purchasing this for half a million 5 years ago and still having to put another $400,000 to $500,000 into it to make it to their tastes. Some of these homes, again, are landlocked. They have no garage, and the owners have to park on the street or...
Well, now you can have zip cars and IGO cars. Do some of the high-rises have
yes,
zips and IGOs?
In fact, that's actually a good point.